Manure spreading. A long, long time ago, when Grandpa was a little boy, we lived on that little farm northwest of Maroa. We had up to 6 milk cows, 2 horses, some calves, goats, chickens, and pigs much of the time. Caring for all these animals was quite a job, and it kept Tommy and me busy. One of these jobs was to spread the manure on the fields. Manure acts as good fertilizer to make the plants or crops grow better. The picture above shows cows going into the barn. The little building is the milk house where we had the cream separator. The water tank is next to the building. The cows were kept in the barn most of the winter, and daily, or more often, the gutter and stalls had to be cleaned of the cow manure and urine. Then, fresh straw, usually from the residual after harvesting the oats, was spread out under the cows. We threw manure onto a pile just outside the back door of the barn. As the pile of manure grew, and as spring was coming, we knew we would have to handle it once again. Our family did not have a regular manure spreader. We only had that wooden spoked, high-wheeled, horse-drawn box wagon used to haul grain as pictured in the story Picking Corn in the Early Days on page 147. The box could be removed, however, leaving just the running gears of the wagon. Daddy would put loose planks, usually 2x6 size tongue and groove boards, to make a narrow, flat bed on the wagon frame, and this was used to haul manure all the years that I was on the farm. Daddy would use a fork to pitch the manure onto the wagon. Then he would drive the horses pulling the wagon into the fields, and the manure would be unloaded by pitching it off the side of the wagon. As Tommy and I grew older, we took on more responsibility. We would both use the pitchforks and manure forks to load the wagon, but since Tommy was older, he would drive the horses. One day, the team of horses was hitched to the wagon with the loose boards, and we had already spread 1 load of manure onto the field. I recall that day also there had been a light snow, and the decomposing manure in the pile was steaming and wet. We had to pitch from the pile onto the wagon, and then pitch it off while standing on the manure as we drove through the field. Tommy was standing on the wagon with the wet, slippery boards. There was no place to sit, and was driving the team up beside the pile for the next load. As he pulled back on the reins, he slipped, but as he did, it slid a board against the rump of one of the horses. In an instant, both of the horses took off running and headed down the dirt lane to the west field. You can see that in the map on page 72. Tommy pulled on the reins and hollered, "Whoa!" His footing was insecure, and he could not stop the horses. They were heading for the creek crossing at a high rate of speed, but Tommy had enough sense to go to the back and jump off. No easy matter under these conditions. When the horses and wagon hit the ditch, boards went flying in every direction. The wagon came apart so that it left the horses pulling only the 2 front wheels and looked much like a chariot. That was a close call for Tommy that I well remember. God had protected him, but we did not realize it at that time. I am sure that my mother did. Some say that manure stinks, but for sure it makes wet boards slippery. That made for an exciting day. This picture on page 81 is of Tommy sitting on the front seat of a manure spreader with Uncle Floyd and me standing alongside, taken at the Brandon farm in Wisconsin in 1944. You can see that I was barefooted. A real manure spreader such as this has a gear that can be engaged with a chain from a sprocket mounted on one of the rear wheels. When the lever was thrown, the load of manure would then slowly move to the back on a chain-driven conveyor, which made up the floor of the wagon. The multiple boards showing under this wagon were part of the conveyor system. Then spinning tines, also driven by the wheel and chain, would throw the manure mainly to the back as the wagon moved across the field. I use the phrase mainly to the back because sometimes a few pieces of manure might be thrown forward toward the driver sitting on the seat. Even at Grandpa Brandon's farm, Tommy and I would both load the wagon with manure from the barn lot area. Since he was older, he could drive the horses that pulled the manure spreader. That manure was good fertilizer to make the hay and other crops grow better, primarily as it adds nitrogen to the soil. Our father always wanted us to be working. That meant we were to do any job that needed to be done, which we were physically able to do, regardless of whether it was hot, hard, or dirty. What a wonderful heritage we had, for he taught us how to work.